She did look fine, didn't she? But I'm afraid she's done it now. Aunt will clear out soon enough, I should think, and Barb will be just as sorry as can be to have flared out like that at a guest, and father's sister too." In that last supposition Donald was quite right, for Mrs. Britton needed to say nothing to make Barbara feel very ashamed of herself. But in his conclusion about his aunt he was quite wrong, for to the children's astonishment Miss Britton showed no signs of speedy departure. Indeed, later in the day, the children felt honesty demanded they must own her to be rather a brick, for she accepted Barbara's apology with good grace, and said that though of course she had been rude, she would not deny that there had been some provocation, and that if Barbara could find out anything more from Dick, she would be glad to hear of it. It was then, after much manoeuvring, that the girl got to the truth of the matter, which Dick related with tears. He had taken the buttons for mother, he said. When he was out with her the other day they had looked for quite a long time at some other beautiful silver ones, and when he asked his mother why she did not buy them, she had said that she had not enough money just then. They were very like the kind on Aunt Anne's blouse, and having noticed that she did not use half of them to button it up, Dick had not seen any reason why they should be left on, although he had meant to tell her what he had done immediately after breakfast. Miss Britton accepted the explanation, and said she thought there was no need for the culprit to be punished this time, and she hoped he would have more sense soon. But about Barbara she had something more of importance to communicate. "In my opinion," she said, in a manner that inferred she expected her advice to be taken, "the girl is much too young to have finished her education, boys or no boys, and I am thinking of sending her to France for a time, to learn more of the language and see something of the world. It is not good for a girl of her age to have so much responsibility." Now, it had been Barbara's dream to go abroad, but after the first gasp of delight and astonishment she grew grave, and said she was afraid she could not leave her mother and the children. "Fiddlesticks!" Aunt Anne replied, without allowing Mrs. Britton time to speak. "You are far too young, my dear, to imagine yourself of such importance in the world. I will send a good old-fashioned nurse that I know of to take your place, and it will be good for the children to have a stricter regime than yours has been for a while." Even if Aunt Anne had been accustomed to have her words disregarded, which she was not, Mrs. Britton would not have needed much persuasion to make her fall in with the proposal, for she had often grieved in private over the fact that, since her husband's death, Barbara's education had had to suffer that Donald's might advance. And now, though she wondered how she would get on without her eldest daughter, she was only too thankful to have such an opportunity thrown in her way. "I cannot think why I never interfered before," Miss Britton said, "but it is better late than never, and we will have as little delay now as possible." In a few days the children were all as busy as bees helping to get Barbara ready. They assisted in choosing her new frocks and hats, and the style of making, and poor Miss Smith, who came to sew for her, was nearly distracted by their popping in every now and then to see how she was getting on. Even Donald, who hated talking about girls' fashions, bought a paper, because he saw it had a pattern of a blouse advertised, and he thought it might be useful. The family were very curious to hear with whom she was going to France, and where she was going to be, for Aunt Anne had undertaken to make all the arrangements, and it certainly was a slight shock to the children when she wrote to say she had made up her mind to go herself for a fortnight to Paris before sending Barbara off to Brittany, where she had found a most suitable place for her in the house of two maiden ladies who took in people wanting to learn French. Donald whistled when Mrs. Britton read that out. "Fancy a fortnight with Aunt Anne, and then the two maiden ladies! Jiggers!" That was a favourite expression of his. "You'll be worried out of your life, Barb." The worst of it was, that Aunt Anne, who had not been abroad for many years, said she was going to let Barbara manage the journey and the sightseeing in Paris, and sent her a guide-book to read up everything of interest. She said she was doing this to give her niece experience, and prepare her for being by herself later on, but Donald declared she wanted to see what kind of stuff she was made of, and that if Barbara did not do things well, she would scoff at her greatly for thinking she could manage a house and children, while she could not succeed in finding her way about France. "But I know the old lady, and we'll just show her you're our sister, and before we've done you'll know that guide-book from cover to cover," he assured her. They had only a week left, for Aunt Anne was very rapid in her decisions and plans, but they studied the guide-book morning, noon, and night. It was most instructive holiday work, Donald said, and when Barbara had not time to read it, Frances and he read for her and poured their knowledge into her ears at meal times. They learned what coloured omnibus went to the different parts of Paris, and on what day different buildings were open, and by the end of the week they all felt they could personally conduct tours all over Paris. It was rather hard when the last day came, because they knew that the house would seem horribly empty without Barbara. The two little ones were on the verge of crying all the afternoon, and Frances had to be very stern, while Donald rose to flights of wit hitherto undreamed of, to keep up every one's spirits. Of course the two elder ones knew it would be hardest on them after Barbara left, because some of her responsibility would fall on their shoulders. But they were quite determined that she should have a cheerful send-off next morning, so they bribed the children with promises of sweets if they did not cry, and they succeeded in giving her quite a hilarious good-bye at the station. After the train had gone, however, and they turned homewards, Frances felt that if she had not promised Barbara to help her mother, she would have hidden herself in the attic and cried, although that would have been so horribly babyish for a girl of 12 that she knew she would have felt ashamed of herself afterwards, though perhaps her pillow could have told tales of a grief confided to it that the gay-hearted Frances did not usually indulge in. End of Chapter 1. Read by Sabella Denton. For more free audiobooks or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.